I think my mom wants me dead, and my daughter might be the only reason I'm still breathing. That's the thought I couldn't shake as I drove through the winding back roads of upstate New York. My 9-year-old daughter sitting quietly in the back seat, tracing foggy shapes on the window with her fingertip. My name's Eli Mercer. I'm 42, and up until last month, I thought I had finally built the quiet life I always dreamed of. A simple house on the edge of Terrytown, freelance IT work I could do from home. And most importantly, my daughter Lila, the only person in this world I trust, without question. But now, with my mother's surprise birthday celebration looming at the family estate, I couldn't help but feel like we were walking into a trap, one carefully prepared by the very people who gave me life. The invitation had arrived in an envelope so pristine, you'd think it came from royalty. My mother, Vivian Mercer, always did have a flair for theatrics. Gold embossing, a wax seal, Mercer Manor, Sunday at noon, RSVP. But that wasn't the part that set off my alarm bells. What chilled me to the core was the note scribbled in elegant handwriting on the back. You and Lila must come. It's time we make things right. Make things right. I haven't spoken to my mother in 3 years, not since she showed up uninvited at my wife's funeral and whispered, "This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't married her." My wife, Naomi, died of a sudden brain aneurysm at 33. No warnings. No signs. One minute she was asking Lila to pick a bedtime story, and the next, she collapsed in the hallway and never woke up. My mother blamed her for everything. And now she wanted us back under the same roof where all my trauma was born? No chance. That was my first instinct. But then, something strange happened. Lila found the envelope before I could throw it away. She read it carefully, then asked, "Do you think maybe Grandma changed?" She looked up at me with those big hazel eyes, so much like her mother's. I've never had a real birthday party with the whole family. Maybe we could just go for a little while. Why did I say no? I wanted to burn the invite and forget it ever happened. But then I remembered the will Naomi and I had written when Lila was a baby, the part that asked me to give her a chance to know her roots when the time is right. Maybe the time would never feel right, but maybe, just maybe, I could endure one afternoon for her sake. So here we were, driving back to the Mercer family estate in Dutchess County, a mansion that sat on 40 acres of forest, hidden behind wrought iron gates and decades of silence. I hadn't been there in 10 years, not since I escaped. "Dad?" Lila's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. "Yeah, sweetheart." She leaned forward, whispering like it was a secret. "Do you think it's weird that the invite said we must come?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I do." But I didn't tell her what really bothered me, the fact that my brother Aiden hadn't signed the invitation. And Aiden never misses a chance to pretend we're still a picture-perfect family. That's when I knew something was off. We pulled through the gates just before noon. The mansion looked exactly the same. Tall stone walls, ivy climbing the facade like claws, windows like blackened eyes watching every move. The lawn was manicured to perfection, but the air felt wrong, stale. We were greeted by Rita, my mother's personal assistant. She wore a pearl necklace and a fake smile, the kind you give at funerals. "Mr. Mercer," she said, nodding at me. Then she turned to Lila, her expression softening. "And this must be the little star of the show. Miss Lila, welcome." "Show?" I asked. But Rita only smiled wider. "Go on in. Everyone's waiting." I took Lila's hand, and we stepped inside. The main hall was decorated like a wedding venue. White roses, chandeliers, a pianist playing soft jazz in the corner. But there was no crowd. No cousins. No uncles. Just 5 people standing at the end of the room. My mother, Vivian, dressed in black velvet like she was hosting a funeral. My estranged brother, Aiden, arms folded, jaw clenched. His wife, Lauren, visibly pregnant and avoiding eye contact. Their son, Theo, age 11, staring at Lila with wide, unreadable eyes. And finally, a man I didn't recognize. He was standing behind my mother, tall, sharp-featured, with unsettlingly calm eyes. Dressed like a butler, but clearly not one. Name I would later learn was Dr. Reynard, and he would change our lives forever. Vivian spread her arms. "Eli, Lila, welcome home." Lila smiled nervously. I did not. I nodded at Aiden. He didn't nod back. "I thought this was a party," I said flatly, my eyes scanning the empty space. "Where is everyone?" Vivian smiled. This is a family gathering. I froze. Not because of what she said, but because I caught a glimpse of something behind her. Medical gurney, half covered with a white cloth, tubes, a rolling monitor, and on the piano, sitting neatly beside the pianist's elbow, is a dusty framed photo of my wife, Naomi. I think I've made a mistake, I whispered to myself. But before I could turn to leave, the tall man, Dr. Reynard, stepped forward and said, Mr. Mercer, I'd like a word with you. It's about your daughter. It's urgent. My heart skipped. What about my daughter? He leaned in closer than I liked and whispered something I'll never forget. She may be in danger. But not from us. Not yet. What do you mean? She's in danger? I stared at Dr. Reynard, every cell in my body ready to explode. He didn't flinch. She's special. And there are things your family hasn't told you. Things tied to Naomi, to Mercer bloodlines, and to what's happening in this house. Oh. My first instinct was to punch him. Instead, I grabbed Lila's hand and turned to leave. But Vivian's voice cut through the marble hall like a dagger. Eli, if you walk out now, you'll never know what Naomi was hiding from you, or what she left behind for Lila. I froze mid-step. Naomi. She'd been gone for years. We buried her next to a lake she loved in Vermont, and held her hand as she was lowered into the ground. Now my mother, the same woman who called Naomi a genetic mistake, was telling me there were secrets. I turned back, my voice low and deadly. You hated her. You said she was beneath us. Vivian smiled like a cat who just found a wounded bird. I did. But she was clever, cunning. Naomi was hiding things from all of us, especially you. Beside her, Aiden shifted uncomfortably. Lauren looked like she was about to cry. Dr. Reynard stepped between us. Perhaps we should speak privately. He gestured to a side hallway lined with portraits, all Mercer ancestors, stone-faced and hollow-eyed. At the end of the hall, a set of oak doors opened to what used to be my father's private study. Now it looked more like a medical research lab. The lights were dim, but inside I could see microscopes, genetic charts, vials of blood, and a digital screen displaying Naomi's face beside a line graph marked DNA Resilience. Subject 7. I grabbed Reynard by the collar. What the hell is this? He didn't fight back. I need you to calm down. Please sit. Listen, I didn't sit. But I didn't leave either. Reynard began pacing, his voice low and deliberate. Your wife Naomi carried a rare mitochondrial mutation, one passed down from mother to daughter, affecting cellular regeneration. It's incredibly rare and valuable. Lila inherited it. My fist clenched. What do you mean valuable? He continued. Naomi volunteered in a private medical study years ago. It was fully legal. You were listed as emergency contact, but she never told you. I swallowed hard. She signed on with the Helix Initiative, a biotech organization working on neurodegenerative treatment. At first, it was blood samples, gene mapping. But then the testing advanced. I shook my head. She never said a word, not one. She didn't want you involved. But after her death, her files were transferred, and we discovered something else. Reynard tapped a folder on the desk. Naomi was pregnant with twins. My knees nearly gave out. What? I whispered. No, we had one child, Lila. There was never a second heartbeat. We checked every visit. Reynard nodded. That's what she wanted you to believe. But she had an early vanishing twin, absorbed in the first trimester. It wasn't medically dangerous, but... He clicked a file on the monitor. Genetically, it altered Lila. The screen showed strands of DNA sequences with flashing red markers. She has a dual helix anomaly, a regenerative trait so rare we've only seen it once before. In a patient who survived a full neurotoxic collapse and recovered without intervention, I stared at him like he was mad. You're telling me my daughter has some kind of mutant DNA? He paused. I'm telling you she could be the key to curing hundreds of incurable diseases, and someone in this house wants to use her before she's old enough to say no. That's when it hit me. Vivian, the inheritance, the sudden family party. You think my mother wants to use Lila in some experiment? Raynor didn't answer directly. She's already pulled strings to contact the Helix board. She knows the clause in Naomi's contract. If the subject's guardian consents, clinical testing can resume. And if custody changes hands. My eyes widened. You're saying, if something happened to me, Lila could end up in their care? He nodded. I stumbled back. My thoughts were racing, nausea creeping up my spine. Why tell me this now? I asked. Why not before? Raynard looked down, suddenly unsure. Because I didn't trust you at first. I thought maybe you were part of it. But then I saw how she looks at you, Lila. She's not scared when she's with you. She's terrified when your mother is near. I walked back into the hallway, heart thundering. Vivian was sipping tea like nothing was wrong. Lila sat quietly on a velvet bench beside Theo, her eyes locked onto mine, and even before I could speak, she mouthed, "Something's wrong." I nodded once. Time to go. "Thank you for the tea," I said loudly, "but we'll be leaving now." Vivian didn't move. "Oh, Eli, I wouldn't be so hasty." Aiden stepped forward now. "There's something else you should know." His voice shook. "I found out 2 days ago that Mom transferred guardianship rights for Lila. In the event of your sudden death." My breath caught. "That's illegal," I started. "She used an old clause in Naomi's contract," Aiden said quickly. "The one that treats the subject like an asset, not a child." I looked down at Lila, my whole world, and suddenly I felt like I couldn't breathe. Raynard appeared behind me. "You need to get her out of here." Now Vivian finally stood, setting her teacup down. "I don't want to hurt anyone, Eli, but you're standing in the way of something bigger than yourself. Naomi was one of us. She understood sacrifice." I pulled Lila behind me. "You never knew her. You sure as hell don't get to decide what happens to our daughter." Vivian sighed. "Then, I suppose this reunion is over." At that moment, Theo, Aiden's son, stood up and slowly approached Lila. "Come with me," he said softly. "I'll help you sneak out the back." Lila looked at me. I nodded. She followed Theo. I turned to Vivian one last time. "Stay away from us, or I'll burn this place to the ground." She smiled coldly. "You always were dramatic." But in her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. It's not cruelty, not control. Desperation. "Dad, there are cameras in the trees?" Lila's voice was a whisper, but the terror in it hit me like a gunshot. We had barely made it to the back edge of Mercer Manor when she stopped dead, clutching my hand. Her cousin Theo was a few paces ahead, waving us toward the narrow path that led into the woods behind the estate. I looked up. Sure enough, tucked into the canopy above us, was a barely visible glint of metal. A security lens. Moving. Damn it! They knew we were leaving. "New system," Theo muttered, grimacing. "Grandma had them installed last month. Motion sensors, heat detection. She said it was for wildlife, but I don't think that was true." I crouched down in front of Lila. "Listen to me. No matter what happens, don't let go of my hand, okay?" She nodded, her eyes wide. I turned to Theo. "You sure there's a way out?" He pointed toward the east end of the estate. "There's a break in the fence where the groundskeepers sneak out to smoke. I've used it before." "Smart kid." I had one more question. "Why are you helping us, Theo?" He blinked, then looked at Lila and whispered, "Because I heard what Grandma said about her, and I don't want her to end up like the others." I froze. "What others?" Theo bit his lip. "She's done this before. There were 2 other kids. Distant relatives. One from Oregon, the other from Virginia. Both girls. Same traits. Both gone." My stomach turned. "They were brought here?" I asked. He nodded. "One for a summer. The other only stayed 3 days. After that, Grandma said they went home. But I found something I can show you, but not now. We have to go."
That was enough for me.
It bolted. Theo led us through a maze of hedges, ducking low through a maintenance tunnel behind the gardener's shed. The path twisted and narrowed until we reached the crumbling section of fence. Beyond it, a forest trail that led down toward the Hudson River. I squeezed through first, then helped Lila and Theo through. Behind us, alarms began to blare. "They're stalling," I said, breathless. "Buying time." Theo looked back, pale. "She has people guards, not just staff. One of them follows Aiden to work. I heard Dad yelling about it last week." We sprinted. Branches clawed at our arms. Leaves whipped past our faces. Lila nearly tripped on a root, but I caught her midful. We didn't stop until we reached an old ranger cabin by the riverside. One I remembered from my childhood hikes. It was barely standing, but it had a roof and a lock. Right now, that was enough. I slammed the door shut and braced it with a fallen beam. Then we all collapsed on the dusty floor. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. "What now?" Theo asked between gasps. I looked at him, then at Lila, then back out the cracked window at the forest we'd just come through. "We get help. Bye." Pulled out my phone. No signal, of course. I stood and began pacing. "We'll rest here for an hour, then move toward the river. There's a trail that runs north, toward Cold Spring. If we're lucky, we can find a boater, ranger, anyone with a phone." Theo stood too. "There's something else." He pulled a folded paper from his back pocket and handed it to me. It was stained and slightly torn, a printout. I unfolded it carefully. It was a Helix Initiative patient file, codename Subject H13, female, born 2012. Status: inactive, disappeared, suspected genetic instability. Final notation: contact severed by Vivian Mercer. I stared at the signature at the bottom. Dr. Eleanor Vaughn, former Helix director. Dated 2 years ago. "She had a girl brought here," Theo whispered. "And when she didn't match Lila's test profile, she was sent away." I didn't want to ask where. Theo pulled out another item, a tiny, leather-bound notebook. "Found this in Grandpa's study. Think it belonged to Naomi." I grabbed it like it was holy. The cover was faded, but her initials were still visible. NDM. Inside her handwriting. Page after page of notes, sketches, diagrams about the genetic condition, about her dreams, and about one final chilling phrase she had underlined in red. "Do not trust the Mercers. If something happens to me, take Lila and run." My hands were shaking. Naomi knew. All this time, she tried to protect us, even from beyond the grave. I turned to Theo. "Why are you risking this? What if they find out you helped us?" He shrugged. "I've lived in that house my whole life. I know what it is. I don't want to end up like Dad, silent, controlled. I'd rather run." I nodded slowly. "You're brave, kid. I mean it." But just then, we heard tires on gravel. A car, coming down the trail. Lights. Voices. Too soon. I grabbed Lila and Theo out the back. Now, the three of us crawled through a hole in the far wall and slipped into the trees. We watched from behind a thicket as 2 black SUVs rolled to a stop outside the cabin. 4 men in dark jackets stepped out. One of them was Dr. Reynard. He looked around carefully, then said, "They were here. I can smell the chalk dust." The kid was carrying an old book. He wasn't chasing us. He was tracking us. "Go," I hissed to the kids. "Stay low. Follow the creek north. I'll catch up." "What are you doing?" Lila gasped. "Buying time." I darted across the brush, circling wide around the cabin and tossing a rock down the hill to make noise. The guards looked. Reynard turned sharply. "East side, move." They bolted in the wrong direction. I slipped back, found the kids again, and we ran. No talking, just branches and breath and fear. By sunrise, we reached the edge of a service road and parked there, like a gift from God. It was a dusty old fisherman's van, engine idling. The driver, an older man in a flannel jacket, was sipping coffee from a thermos. He looked up, startled. I stepped forward, hands raised. "Sir, please, we're in trouble. Can you take us to town?" He studied my face, then Lila's, then Theo's dirty shirt and scraped knee. Something in his eyes softened. "Get in?" Naomi had a backup plan. I think she knew exactly how this would unfold. It's what I kept telling myself as the fisherman's van rolled toward town. Lila had fallen asleep in the back seat, her head on my lap, holding the little leather notebook Naomi had left behind. Leo sat beside her, eyes red but alert, clutching his own backpack like it was all he had in the world. We made it to Cold Spring, a small riverside town where the shops didn't open until 10. The streets were still fogged over. Fishermen. Carl dropped us behind a general store and handed me a burner phone. "No questions," he said. "But if anyone comes around asking, I never saw you." I nodded, too tired to respond. Then I looked down at Naomi's notebook again. Somewhere inside was the answer to everything, but I hadn't had the chance to read it all yet. I found a corner booth at a 24-hour diner off Main Street and ordered 3 hot chocolates and a black coffee. The waitress, bless her, didn't ask why I looked like I'd just escaped a mental ward. When the kids were settled, I opened the journal. Page after page detailed Naomi's work with Helix. She had suspected from the beginning that the Mercers were tied to the organization, that her participation was less about science and more about control. Her last entry, written just weeks before her aneurysm, said, "I found something in the Mercer genealogy files, a pattern, first daughters, all carriers. My mother-in-law has been targeting them for decades." It was underlined 3 times. I stared at it, my hands trembling. Vivian Mercer wasn't just opportunistic. She was running a generational experiment, using family members as test subjects, and Naomi was her greatest threat. That's when I remembered something. Naomi's laptop. The one I'd stored away in the attic after her death, unable to open it because I didn't know the password. I looked at Theo. "Do you know if Vivian kept any backup files from Naomi's Helix involvement?" He nodded. "She keeps digital backups on a flash drive. Gold casing. In the piano bench under the cushion." I nearly laughed. Of course she does. But that flash drive might contain everything. The real contract, the test results, even custody plans. I made a decision right then. We had to go back, not to the estate itself, but to someone who might still be on our side. Enter Henry Delaney, my godfather, my father's former business partner, now a semi-retired estate attorney living just outside Beacon. He was one of the only people who ever stood up to my mother. If anyone could help us legally unravel the Mercer's grip, it was Henry. We caught a rideshare under fake names and arrived at his brownstone an hour later. Henry opened the door in slippers and a Yale sweatshirt. His jaw dropped when he saw us. "Eli." He blinked. "My God, is that Lila?" I nodded grimly. "You don't have much time." I explained everything. The inheritance trick, the genetics, Naomi's journal, the escape. Henry didn't interrupt once. I finished. He poured us both a drink and said, "I always knew Vivian was playing a long game, but I didn't think she'd weaponize your own daughter." He stood, walked to a safe behind a bookshelf, and retrieved a file marked Mercer Trust Clauses Emergency Protocol. "She had me draft this before Naomi's death," he explained. "Told me it was for legacy planning, but I never filed it." Something felt off. He opened the folder and pulled out a document. There in black ink was an agreement. Should Eli Mercer become incapacitated or deceased, legal guardianship of Lila Mercer will be transferred to Vivian Mercer in accordance with Clause 13C. My blood went cold. "But here's the catch," Henry said, eyes twinkling. "That clause is only valid if no other living blood relatives on Naomi's side contest it." I stared. Naomi was an only child. Her parents passed before Lila was born. But then I remembered something. Naomi's cousin, a woman she barely spoke of, Claire Donovan, a pediatrician in Portland, Oregon. She and Naomi had fallen out over something years ago, but she was still technically family. "She's still alive," I said quickly. "Claire, I can call her." Henry grinned. "Good, that gives us leverage." But just then, the front door creaked open. We all froze. Henry turned slowly. I didn't lock A figure stepped into the room, and my heart dropped. Disheveled, pregnant belly beneath a raincoat, hair wet from the drizzle. She looked at me, then Lila, then at Theo. "I had to come," she whispered. "I couldn't live with it anymore." Henry stepped protectively in front of Lila. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," Lauren cried. "But you need to know the truth. It wasn't your mother who pushed the Helix study forward. It wasn't Vivian." She pointed to Theo. "It was Aiden." Theo's mouth fell open. "What?" Lauren nodded, tears in her eyes. "He cut a private deal with Helix months ago, behind Vivian's back. He planned to trade custody of Lila for a secret payout. He forged the documents, not your mother." I felt dizzy. "Why would he do that?" Lauren trembled. "Because he's broke, Eli. After the real estate collapse, Vivian cut him off. He got desperate. He told Helix he could deliver Lila, legally, and Vivian. She just decided to get ahead of it and make it look like it was her plan all along." Lila stepped closer to me, her hand in mine. And for the first time, I didn't know who the real villain was anymore. Henry sat down slowly. "If that's true, then this family has shattered itself from the inside out." But Lauren wasn't done. "There's something else," she said. Naomi didn't die of an aneurysm. That was a lie. She pulled out a flash drive from her coat pocket. This is the autopsy I had done in secret. I wasn't sure if I'd ever show you. But after what Aiden said last night, I knew you had to see it. I stared at the flash drive like it was on fire. Are you saying Naomi was murdered? Lauren nodded. She didn't collapse. She was injected with something. Something Helix developed to mimic cerebral failure. I stood. We're ending this tonight. Don't go back there alone, Eli. You may not make it out this time. Henry's words echoed in my head as I crossed the long gravel drive to Mercer Manor one final time. The sun was beginning to set, casting a gold glow over the estate like it didn't know the evil that lived inside. In the passenger seat, Naomi's flash drive rested in my coat pocket. In my hand, a printed copy of her real autopsy report, and in my chest, fury that had simmered for 4 years. I had left Lila with Henry and Lauren at a secure hotel in Beacon, along with Theo, who was still reeling from the news about his father. Claire Donovan, Naomi's cousin, had agreed over the phone to support us to legally contest Vivian's guardianship bid. That alone shattered their entire case. But this wasn't about custody anymore. It was about justice. I wasn't just here to stop them. I was here to end it. I stepped into the foyer without knocking. The lights were low. Classical music floated from somewhere deeper in the house. Something sharp and dissonant, like the opening of a horror film. And there, waiting for me in the main hall, was Vivian, dressed in crimson, smiling. God came back, she said softly. I had a feeling. I know everything, I replied. She tilted her head. You always think you do, Eli. But knowing and proving are different things. I stepped closer, slowly. You lied about Naomi's death. You forged custody documents. You plotted to hand over my daughter for money, or power, or both. But I've got the autopsy. I've got Naomi's journal. Now I have the flash drive. Her smile didn't waver. I always wondered if you had that steel in you, she said. You were so soft. Naomi gave you fire. That was the only good thing she ever did. You're sick, I whispered. No, Eli, I'm a survivor. And I did what our bloodline demanded. The Mercer gift, the gene. It's real. It's rare. And if used right, it can change the world. I pulled the flash drive from my coat. You don't get to decide how the world changes. I tossed it onto the marble floor. Vivian blinked. Then the lights above us flickered, and Aiden stepped out from the shadows behind the staircase. His face was pale, sunken, like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. He looked at me, then at our mother, then back at me. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he croaked. I just needed money. Helix promised me they'd protect Lila, said she'd be cared for, that I'd still see her. I didn't know they'd what, Aiden? I snapped. Murder Naomi? Inject her with something that paralyzed her brainstem, so it looked like a natural aneurysm? He swallowed hard. Vivian turned to him with ice in her voice. You told him? He looked at her, his voice cracking. No, Lauren did. Vivian's face fell. She stepped forward slowly, eyes dark. You brought ruin to this family, you and that. But she didn't finish, 'cause just then Dr. Reynard walked in behind her, holding a black case. I suggest everyone take a seat, he said coolly. We're not done. I spun around. You're still working with her? Reynard smiled. No, I'm not. Not anymore. I came to see this through. He opened the case and pulled out a DNA test kit, labeled, Subject, Elmer Sur F1. You were all fools, he said, walking slowly. Naomi knew this would happen. It's why she left behind one final failsafe. He held up a piece of paper, a last page from Naomi's journal I hadn't yet read. If anyone tries to control our daughter's life, use the test. Run it against Mercer DNA. You'll see what I already knew. I blinked. What is it? Raynor turned the paper toward me, and what I saw knocked the wind out of me. Lila's DNA doesn't match Eli's entirely, 'cause Eli is not her biological father. The room froze. Aiden gasped. Vivian's lips parted in horror, but I just stared at the words. Reynard nodded solemnly. Naomi had a secret. She was part of another study before Helix. When she and Eli were going through infertility issues, she used a donor. I couldn't move, Reynard continued. But here's the twist. The donor wasn't a stranger. It was Naomi herself. I blinked. What? What does that mean? It means, Reynard said gently, that Naomi used a rare genetic technique, self-cloning through a harvested egg, modified into a viable embryo. She was testing something unheard of, a near clone with altered DNA. Lila is not just her daughter. Genetic twin, a perfected version of herself. Vivian sank into a chair. No, that's impossible. Reynard smirked. No, it's genius. He pointed at her. And you lost everything, because your contracts, your inheritance claim, your genetic harvesting plans, all depended on Lila being Eli's child. I fell to my knees. Lila wasn't mine. Vivian stared at me, broken. It was always about her, not you, never you. Reynard turned to me now. But here's the thing, Eli. DNA doesn't decide who's a father. He handed me a second paper. Naomi's real will, handwritten, signed. I want Eli Mercer to be Lila's father, in name, in heart, and spirit. He is the only one I trust to protect her from the world I could not escape. I couldn't speak. Reynard closed the case. It's over. I've sent copies of everything to the Federal Biotech Board. Helix is finished. And as for you, he looked at Vivian, you'll never hold legal custody over another soul again. She's not my blood. She's my reason to live. That's more than DNA will ever be. That's what I told the court 2 weeks later, standing with my hand on Naomi's final letter, reading her words to a room full of lawyers, family, and strangers. It had all unraveled quickly after that final night at Mercer Manor. Vivian was arrested under state and federal charges: fraud, medical conspiracy, lawful guardianship claims, and obstruction of a death investigation. Aiden was named a co-conspirator, but Lauren testified against him and was granted immunity. She and Theo were placed under protective supervision and eventually moved out of state. Dr. Reynard? Last we heard, he gave sworn statements to the Federal Biotech Investigations Bureau, then disappeared under witness protection. I don't know if he was a savior or just another scientist trying to cleanse his conscience, but he gave me Naomi's truth. With that, he gave me my daughter back. Lila and I returned to our little house in Terrytown. Silence there used to haunt me after Naomi died. Now, it felt like peace, like home. The legal papers came in slowly. Custody, estate transfers, and the final stamped seal of approval that marked Vivian Mercer legally severed from all ties to Lila, by order of the court, and the will of her own granddaughter. She stood up in front of a dozen strangers, holding Naomi's journal like a shield, and said in her soft, unwavering voice, "My dad, Eli, is the one who raised me, who reads to me, who makes pancakes and lets me draw all over the fridge with magnets. I don't care about genetics. I care about love. I don't want to see my grandma again. Ever." There wasn't a dry eye in that courtroom, and the judge ruled in our favor without hesitation. 6 months later, the seasons changed, so did we. I went back to freelancing, consulting for cybersecurity firms, helping nonprofits protect whistleblowers. It felt right. Lila started therapy. She didn't like it at first, but then her counselor, a woman named Dr. Jenna Marks, introduced her to expressive writing, and something clicked. She started a story journal. Each entry ended with the phrase, "Me and Dad, still standing?" She also started asking questions about Naomi. What was her favorite smell? What was her laugh like? Do you think she'd be proud of me? Every question hurt and healed at the same time. Then one night I heard her ask something different. "Do you think Mom knew she wasn't going to live long?" I paused, looked into her eyes. "Yes," I said gently. "I think she knew. I think that's why she wrote everything down. That's why she made plans. That's why she chose me to raise you, even though I'm not really yours," she whispered. I smiled, my throat tight. "You're absolutely mine. I chose you too, every single day. That's never going to change." She leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I'm glad it's you." 1 year later, Lila started middle school with new confidence. She joined the science club, wrote a prize-winning essay on medical ethics. We planted a tree for Naomi in our backyard and named it Legacy. We even adopted a rescue dog, a wiry little mutt named Max, who's afraid of vacuums and fiercely loyal. Life started to feel okay. Then one day we got a letter in the mail. From an anonymous address in Colorado, inside was a single photo. Dr. Raynard, standing next to a woman in a white coat. Behind them, a laboratory sign. The Eli Mercer Institute for Ethical Biogenetics. Lila stared at it for a long time, then she whispered, "Mom's name is going to help people." I nodded. She already has. I write this sitting on our porch, the late sun casting shadows over Naomi's tree. Lila is inside, singing along to some song I can't keep up with, and Max is curled at my feet, twitching in a dream. We've come through fire. We've lost things we'll never get back. But we've also found something more powerful than revenge, than truth, than even justice. We've found peace. And that's why, when people ask if I regret going back to Mercer Manor, if I wish I had ignored that invitation, I say no. Because that night, I didn't just protect my daughter. She saved me too. The end. Your turn. If you found out your child wasn't biologically yours, but they had saved your life, emotionally or literally, would it matter to you? Or would love still be enough? Drop your answer in the comments. This story may be fictional, but the love it represents is very, very real.